Welcome to the Carousel of Happiness Podcast. I'm your host, Allie Wagner. On our last episode, you learned about a new addition to the roof of the carousel. A Guy Pfeiffer original, the Loverator now spins atop the second-story roof, and with it spreads love, joy, and peace. On last week's episode, we learned about the electromagnetic field of the carousel, the anatomy of the human heart, and the power of living a heart-centered life. On today's episode, I go elbows deep into the Wonder Box and fish out some of your questions and musings about life, love, joy, and peace. We'll discover the healing power of wonder and awe, how it connects us to one another, the world around us, and something larger than ourselves. We'll learn how awe improves our physiology and our communities, as well as our overall well-being. We'll explore how we're wired for it and how it propels our evolution by putting us in a heightened state of consciousness. Before we get started, I want to send some love to Kelly from Evergreen, Colorado, who visited the carousel last week and signed our guest book. For those of you who haven't been to the carousel yet, as you walk into the carousel house, that's the 12-sided building that houses the carousel, on your left you'll see a friendly monk seal holding a guest book. We've had this guest book since we opened in 2010, and it's always so fun to see what you guys write in there. But because I am horribly and unabashedly biased, I happen to notice a particular note in the guest book from Kelly because she wrote that she visited the carousel last week specifically because she heard this podcast. Kelly, reading your message gave me goosebumps. Thank you. It feels so good to know that this podcast is having an impact on your lives. And you sharing that note made me feel more connected to my purpose and to you, at least just for a little bit somehow. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And speaking of goosebumps, we're going to talk about those today. What it means when we get them and how they are related to our experience of wonder and awe. So let us begin with today's story. When you enter the carousel, on the left-hand side of the gift shop, you'll see a little wooden table with a couple of equally tiny chairs. Typically, the table is covered in a seasonal tablecloth of some kind, hearts for Valentine's Day, pumpkins for Halloween, that sort of thing. And on this table are crayons and markers and little pieces of paper shaped like Christmas trees and butterflies and flowers, depending on the season. And next to the tiny table is a clear plastic box on the wall that we call the Wonder Box. We invite anyone who visits, whether you ride the carousel or not, to sit down at the tiny table, use the markers and crayons provided, and ponder what makes you wonder. And if you'd like, you can share your answers with us by putting it in the Wonder Box. We've had the Wonder Box at the carousel since 2021. And we've gotten some pretty amazing answers. If you're curious next time you stop by, check out the paper mobiles hanging in the gift shop. You'll see how visitors young and old answered the question, what makes you wonder? One of my favorites hangs directly in my line of vision when I'm working at the front desk. It's written in little kid handwriting and it asks, am I real? Did you just get goosebumps? I did. And the Wonder Box was getting pretty full this week, so I decided to take its contents home and go through it. See what I could learn from it. See what kind of episode I could make from it on the podcast. First and foremost, I must say I loved reading your handwriting. There is something special about reading someone's handwriting. I think it's the same as listening to someone's voice. With both, you can get a sense of personality, a sense of uniqueness. It's something you can't quite get from reading text. Your handwriting gave me insights into who you are that I would have otherwise missed had we had you type your answers into a tablet or a computer. From your handwriting, I could make some guesses about your age, whether or not you were a child or an adult. From your handwriting, I could see how your brain works, particularly for the younger participants. I could see how you connected words in different combinations because you put those words in different places on the page. From your handwriting, I could see how words sound to you in your head because that's the way you spelled them out without autocorrect. Yes, autocorrect is helpful, but in some ways it feels like it's taking the human element out of written communication. And don't even get me started on AI. So first and foremost, I loved reading your handwriting. It made me feel closer to you, connected to you. You felt real to me reading your handwriting. This week's episode felt like a back and forth. It felt like a conversation. Because through these little pieces of paper, I got to know you, what you care about, what you wonder about. I also loved how obvious patterns started to develop almost immediately. So my highly scientific method of executing this project was this. I dumped out the contents of the Wonder Box on the floor of my office, and I started grouping the answers into little piles. For example, there was a pile of little papers for those of you wondering about nature or animals or the stars in the sky. Many of you wondered about the tooth fairy and mermaids and Bigfoot. Also, there was much focus on all sorts of Santa-related logistics. You also wondered about music, about democracy, about kindness. Many of you were curious about rainbows and unicorns, and I am sorry to say this, dear cat-loving listener, more of you were interested and wondered about dogs than cats. I learned you were curious about how things worked. Things like snowmobiles and hot air balloons, cameras, motorcycles, trains, Bluetooth. You also tackled the deeper questions of our time, like, does the chicken come before the egg? If a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? I discovered you were curious about life and death. Many of you wondered about your loved ones who've moved on. You wondered how they were doing, where they are, whether or not they missed you. You wondered about each other. Whether or not your daughter would grow up to be kind, what was going on in your grandson's imagination. You wondered about what other people wondered about. You wondered what other people saw. Many of you wondered about romantic love. Does he love me? Why doesn't she want me? When will he propose? Why did Cam hold Miles's hand, but not mine? Because I was reading your handwriting, I know some of our youngest visitors pondered some of the deepest questions. How language was created, how the universe started. Our little ones wondered about how babies were made, who the first human was, and where we go when we die. You also wondered about the meaning of this human experience. Is this life just a beautiful dream? At the end of this story, you wondered, do we get to begin a new one, or do we start over? You wondered where our memories go after we die. Many of you wondered about God, the mountains, and skiing. And probably not surprising, you wondered why we can't all just love each other. You wondered how the world stays beautiful through evil. Why we can't come together. You wondered when there will be peace. But you also wondered how love could be so strong. You wondered what makes you a better person. You wondered how the heart transcends suffering and what makes us come alive. A very, very young participant wondered how people knew how to fall in love. And speaking of love, a considerable stack of answers were all about love. You wrote, I love you. Hi, I love you. Hola, I love you. Ada loves Zanelle. I heart you. Love. You drew little hearts. You told me you love Lucas. You told me you love each other. All you need is love. Dios es amor. You wrote love in big bold letters. You told us to choose love always, to love each other. You love your dads, your moms. You love your friends. You encouraged us to love ourselves. You told us love is the key. You spelled love with O's and U's. You symbolized it with hearts over and over. I love you. I love you. Love, love. Someone loves Kiera. John, all he wants and needs is love. Gia loves her dad. Mom loves Sequoia. Someone really loves muffins. And these piles help me see patterns. These piles help me see how similar yet different we are. We might be unique individuals, but there are common threads in wonder that unite us all. And we're not alone in this carousel community. It turns out our answers reflect similar patterns to what researchers discovered when they interviewed 26,000 people from 26 countries about awe. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the podcast. But first, what is wonder? What do we mean when we talk about wonder? The word wonder is defined as a cause of astonishment or admiration, a quality of exciting, amazed admiration, or rapt attention or astonishment at something awesomely mysterious or new to one's experience. The word comes from the Latin word miraculu, which refers to anything wonderful beyond human power, a supernatural event, a miracle, if you will. And many a philosopher, scientist, writer have contemplated the concept of wonder or states of wonder. Einstein said of wonder, he to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer pause to wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. His eyes have closed. Philosopher Aristotle said, wonder is a vehicle used to escape ignorance. And the theologian Thomas Aquinas said, poets and philosophers are alike in being big with wonder. Wonder is a complex human emotion that seems to be equal parts attention and contemplation, newness and surprise, and awe and astonishment. When we wonder, we direct our attention somewhere. We might wonder, like many of you did, about how the seasons change. This requires our attention. This requires our focus. This requires us to notice something. When we wonder about something, we contemplate it. We meditate upon it. Wonder also has the element of newness or surprise to it. That's what the philosophers and scientists were getting at. When something is new, we are curious about it. When something surprises us, we want to learn more. This beginner's mind mentality has propelled human evolution and innovation as each of us explores our own curiosities and interests. Then there's the element of awe and astonishment. That's where the Latin root comes in. When we are in awe and astonishment, we are experiencing something beyond what we previously thought possible. According to Dacher Keltner, a UC Berkeley professor and researcher, awe is the feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends your current understanding of the world. And it turns out my little Wonderbox experiment reflects very similar results to the ones Keltner and his associates got when they interviewed 26,000 people from 26 countries about the complex human emotion of awe. You can check out the full results in Keltner's book, Awe, The New Science of Everyday Wonder and How It Can Transform Your Life. After analyzing all of the responses from participants, Keltner and his fellow researchers identified what they called the 8 wonders of life. These are 8 areas of life that evoke a state of awe in human beings. One of the most popular answers to the questions researchers asked about awe was a bit surprising for Keltner. One of the most common wonders of everyday life was not nature. It was not God, it was not life and death, like some of the researchers anticipated. The most common wonder that put people readily in states of awe was actually something called moral beauty. Moral beauty is witnessing courage, kindness, and strength in overcoming adversity in others. I'm going to say that again. The number one thing across 26 countries, rich and poor, big and small, 26,000 humans, the number one thing to put human beings in a state of awe was watching other humans display courage, kindness, and strength in overcoming the odds. How many of you have felt that way about the carousel? How many of you have heard Scott's personal story and felt awe or astonishment? How many of you heard those first couple of episodes of the podcast and felt like he accomplished something beyond what you previously thought possible? Yeah, me too. Researchers also noted that human beings experience awe when they engage in what is called collective effervescence. That's the feeling of energy and harmony people experience when they're engaged in a shared purpose. You experience collective effervescence when you're at public gatherings moving in unison with one another. So you can think football games, political rallies, yoga classes, dance clubs, when you go to church and you sing as a group. This is the second most common way to experience awe. Then there's nature. When we spend time in nature, we feel connected to the ecosystem. We feel connected to this earth. And this isn't just hippy-dippy stuff. We now know nature changes our neurophysiology. The sound of water, like a babbling brook or ocean waves crashing on the beach, that sound activates our vagus nerve, putting us into a parasympathetic state. The chemical compounds present in sweet-smelling flowers boost our immune system. Our bodies are quite literally wired to respond to nature. According to Keltner, visual art puts us in states of awe. Think about the Da Vinci's Mona Lisa, Van Gogh's Starry Night, Botticelli's Venus. How many of you love the carousel because it's a work of art? Because it's visually pleasing. Music also puts us in a state of awe. Many of you had questions or comments about the band organ, that signature sound. What does it remind you of? Does it trigger a memory? Music has the power to transport us to different times and places. It connects us to our childhood, to our memories, and also each other. Musical composer Julia Perry wrote, "Music has a unifying effect on the peoples of the world, but because they all understand and love it. And when they find themselves enjoying and loving the same music, they find themselves loving one another. How many of you made instant friends in high school because you liked the same music? Music is a common language. Music is a visceral language. Researchers also found that we experience wonder when we have epiphanies or aha moments. When we're exposed to big ideas that challenge our beliefs, we experience wonder. We also feel wonder in mystical or spiritual experiences. Many of you wondered about God, about the meaning of life, about your purpose on this planet. And lastly, the eighth wonder of everyday life, life and death itself. Many people, myself included, have experienced states of wonder when being confronted with the death of a loved one or in witnessing the birth of a baby. It turns out awe is good for us. Actually, it's not just good for us, it is life-giving. Human beings are wired to experience awe. It is part of our genetic makeup. We crave it. Awe stimulates the vagus nerve and it deactivates the default mode network in our brains. The default mode network is the part of our brain that is only focused on ourselves. When it is turned off, like it is during meditation, during psychedelic trips, or in states of awe, we lose our sense of our own selfishness and connect with one another. This allows us to make better decisions for our communities, not just ourselves. Remember those goosebumps I got at the top of the show? Well, that tingly sensation that makes your hair stand up on end, that's actually a physiological symptom of awe in mammals. So are tears and chills. All are proof you are experiencing awe in that moment. When the hair of mammals stands up on end like it does when you have goosebumps, it's actually about our connection to each other. The bodily function has its roots in animals whose fur would puff out in order to keep warm together in the cold. It would allow animals to feel closer and warmer to one another. And this communal connection against shared threats is how mammals like us have evolved. Awe has the capacity to do the same thing for us that psychedelics or gratitude or meditation can do. It rewires our brain, allowing us to become healthier human beings and better community members. Awe connects us to something larger than ourselves. Awe connects us to our ecosystem, so we're motivated to protect it. Awe gets us out of our heads and into our communities. Awe changes our brain chemistry. Awe heals our bodies. And as researchers found out, awe is free. You can experience it walking in the woods, visiting a museum, or reading a book to your child. If you'd like to incorporate some more awe in your everyday life, you can start taking what Keltner calls awe walks. Go for a walk, ideally in nature, and look for things that amaze you, both big and small. Notice the leaf on the tree, notice the squirrel in the grass, notice the laughing baby on the swing. Or you can come to the carousel. Learn about Scott's story, examine the beauty of the carvings, or sing along to the band organ. And when you're done, perhaps sit at the little wooden table on the left with some markers and some crayons and reflect on what makes you wonder. Because it could just change your life. In the meantime, take care. Be well. And as we like to say at the Carousel of Happiness, don't delay joy. And we'll see you next time around.
Beginnings and endings are only pretendings. I'll see you next time around. I'll see you next